Hey guys, welcome to another episode of For the Good of the Game. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of hosting Liffort Hobley, former LSU Tiger, Go Tigers, national champs in 2020 as the 2019 season. But Liffort is a guy that I met through my association with Major League Football. We've done several coordinated events here in the Dallas area. Liffort played, as I said, at LSU and was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the third round in 1985 draft. And he was with the Steelers and St. Louis his first year, and then ultimately ended up with the Miami Dolphins and finished a very strong 8-year career in the NFL with the Dolphins. So I would first of all like to officially welcome Liffort Hobley to the show. Thanks for being here, Coach.
Oh, Coach, thanks for inviting me. I was pleased that you called and said yes to being on the show. I think it's a great opportunity for us to talk about some of the things here we do as NFL alumni after your career. That's
absolutely awesome. I will bring up a couple of different things, but one of the things I want the crowd to know here is that Liffort is the sitting president of the Dallas chapter of the NFL Alumni Association. I've been involved with several different events in this area, and Liffort's been very instrumental in helping us coordinate and get to the place we needed to be to run these events. So it's all worked out well. I want to go back and just give you an opportunity to kind of give us a quick synopsis of kind of how you got your start in football, your football journey from beginning up through when you went to LSU to play.
Oh, my goodness. I started just went out for a team when I was 9, 10 years old. My first position was center. Basically, I was a better athlete than a lot of the kids, so our coach needed someone to protect the quarterback and get the ball to him. No one could actually do that, so I actually engaged, and I was able to do that. My first time touching a football, going on a football field, I was a center.
Isn't that crazy to end up playing safety? Isn't that weird?
Exactly. And, after the Little League football, you get to middle school, and they recognize your talent, and then, of course, you start to move around. They start to put you in positions where you can actually really help the team. So at Broadmoor Junior High, I became a running back. A year later, I was the quarterback, and from on and on through high school, I played quarterback. As an athlete, I very seldom got plays in on defense because our coach in high school wanted to protect his quarterbacks, and of course, you got a few reps here and there, but not very many.
Sure, understand.
And then on from high school, I got an opportunity to obtain a scholarship, even though I had a lot of major universities interested. Going to Byrd High School, wearing the purple and gold, sort of resonated with going directly to LSU. Wasn't my first visit as a official visit. I actually visited Ole Miss and Tulane University before I actually visited LSU as an option, and just happened to see a lot of similarities, a lot of relationships of players that I played against in high school, and some that I admired as players in high school. So LSU is my choice.
That's outstanding. I know that they have come a long way and had there was kind of late a circuitous route back to the national championship. Interestingly enough, going through Alabama or trying a couple of times prior to defeating them in the playoffs.
Right.
And, of course, Nick Saban having coached LSU to a national championship was, a kind of interesting. So who were the coaches you played for when you were there?
I was recruited, that gentleman that rarely gets talked about or basically discussed in the LSU conversation is Bo Ryan, who was a head coach at North Carolina State.
Sure.
Brought his entire staff to Baton Rouge to engage as the head coach in 1980. I signed with Bo Ryan, letter of intent to basically just, hey, I'm going to try you as a quarterback coming in LSU. Unfortunately, Coach Ryan, after signing a couple of players that night, flew back to Baton Rouge and his plane crashed. So he died in a plane crash and never got to address or coach the team. But I stayed a course, and Jerry Stovall took over as the head coach, former LSU great and former St. Louis Cardinal as well.
Sure.
I trusted in his words of basically me coming in and getting the right opportunity to play at LSU. When I walked on campus, I thought I was a quarterback. When I walked in my locker room, I got number 29, really big number for a quarterback, so I accepted it. I accepted that challenge, and it turned out to be an amazing opportunity for me. My future basically predicated on being able to make changes.
Sure.
And I was willing to make that change. And a lot of players get to college and they get stuck on opportunities that they don't see, which is changing positions. And if you can transition to a different position and see it as an asset to your organization or to the college, then of course you've made that. You can make those transition at the next level as well.
Now, do you think that transitioning to defense and specifically to safety, having played quarterback, gave you a little bit kind of in the vision in reverse? You know, you were looking at it from the other end.
I can imagine every safety in the NFL at one point had played some quarterback in their lifetime as a either a young player coming up as a kid. And of course, yes, it does. It really does help you focus on some of the things that happen on the other side of the ball. And you're actually that signal caller on the defensive side of the ball, so you can actually see those changes and get your guys in the right position.
Absolutely.
Even a defensive line, you can actually get calls up to that level where they can actually make the changes they need to be aggressive as well.
And did you, when you went to LSU, as you walked in the door and as you said, went to the locker room and saw number 29, did you necessarily at that point have aspirations of trying to go to the league, or was it more about, I'm just going to try and survive here at the major college level?
It was, because I had no idea as a student coming in my freshman year. My first day of practice was all of the players broke into their individual groups. When I broke into my group, I was the only defensive back standing on the field.
Wow.
So I had Coach Greg Williams and Coach Buddy Green took times putting me through drills for about 20 minutes every day, trying to make me basically just fall off my game, but never happened. I went through it like it, just kind of engaged it and accepted the challenge, and being able to have the endurance to run all day made them happy. They were pleased.
Do you think that going through that, albeit somewhat unplanned, going through that transition and then going through the University of Hard Knocks, so to speak, coming in, learning a new position, everything, do you think that made you a little more hungry, a little more competitive when you did get drafted and went into the NFL?
It basically, as a player coming out as an NFL, going into the NFL, I still think I wasn't prepared. Mentally and physically, yes. Mentally prepared. Basically, I look back at my career and where I sat in the draft, and also the team I was drafted by, and looking at what basically the players that they had at the time. Not knowing what I know today, wish I had got drafted by a different team.
So you as you comment as coming out, a lot of times, and I've actually talked to other coaches, other former players about this. You made the comment that sometimes you wish you'd have gone to a different team initially, but there are many times, and I don't think a lot of people understand that it is so dependent on when a guy is drafted, unless he happens to be the top 10 guy in the draft, but certainly beyond the first round. There are still a heck of a lot of players that come out of college that don't fit the system or get into bad situations for their ability and the scheme they played in. So talk a little bit about that, as far as the challenges that you felt, moving to safety and then going up, when you finally got to the Dolphins.
When I got to Pittsburgh, I rarely got a rep at safety. I was a nickelback in a corner.
Ah, okay.
Due to my speed and size, they tried that. And then, of course, right at the end of when I did get released, there was an article that was written actually by one of the writers in Pittsburgh, and I still have that article. Basically, it was actually I was actually looking at the article, and it seems like I was actually already being released before I even stepped on the field.
Wow.
So when I looked at the article and really read it, I went, how is that possible? I haven't played it down. And they're saying I'm having a hard time and struggling gaining the confidence of the coaches when we haven't even played a down yet or practice a down. So I thought that was kind of one of those articles that kind when I went back to it, I went, wow, that's kind of crucial. If I'd have saw that basically before, training camp started, I would actually address the coach and said, hey, what is this? You're having this conversation with writers, but I haven't touched the fill yet. But, that was neither here nor there. I got an opportunity, and then, of course, it didn't work out for me. But once I actually looked at the other options, I got a chance again in St. Louis, played about 7 games with the Cardinals. They had to make some transitions to bring another veteran player back. Mm-hmm. So I was released, but still a Cardinal for the entire year. So if anything happens, they can always transition me back as an active player. With that said, I took an opportunity and took some advice from my college coach, who was at the end of my career at LSU. Bill Unsbarger came on my senior year, put us through a really rigorous program for about 4 months. We got it. We understood it. We accepted the challenge, and we went 10-1-1 his first year. When I needed advice, I went back to my old coach, who was a Dolphin defensive coordinator for 30 years. And he basically encouraged me to sign with the Dolphins.
Interesting.
And in 86, I did. I went to the Miami Dolphins training camp, walked in, had some of the information I already needed, being that I left LSU my senior year. Some of that information was entrenched in my mind, the defense concept of what the Dolphins were looking for. Unfortunately, they decided to stay with their progression that they had in place with their safeties, veteran safeties. And I went back home after training camp, took on a job, and worked for a whole year as an insulator for a company in Baton Rouge. And
just a regular guy.
Just a regular guy. I basically didn't have time to work out because that 10-hour day came every day. But honestly, I went back to the Dolphins based on the knowledge that I already had. It wasn't about the money. It was about making the team and showing all of the different coaches that didn't give me an opportunity that I could actually play.
It's interesting. You are among a handful of guys that I know and have interviewed or talked to offline that have had that type of experience. And whether you want to call it, the chip on your shoulder or whatever it is, it's there. Sometimes the internal force that pushes you is much more powerful than external motivation, because you want to prove it to them and you want to prove it to yourself.
That's for sure.
And I think that's a powerful message to a lot of young athletes. We've seen them at a couple of different places. Most recently, I was back here when we did the tryout camp for MLFB in March. But I see that a lot, and you see that kind of grit and determination in a lot of those young players' faces, and that's a good thing. Well, let's talk a little bit about the transition and coming back. And I know that you've worked here and been in the area for a while, but you are the current sitting president of the Dallas chapter of the NFL Alumni. I know that the various different chapters across the country have various levels of involvement and activity within their organizations, but I happen to know that this one is, up and coming as well as ongoing, because
Certainly.
You've really put some fuel behind it. What type of activities are you guys involved in the Dallas community, and what specifically are you working on right now?
Well, we're a Caring for Kids organization, first of all, and caring for our own. Right now, working to get more of our players active. A lot of our players are already active in the community on their own behalfs. A lot of our guys have nonprofit organizations. So what I'm looking to do in the future, any event that we plan would be for one of our NFL alumni players, nonprofit. We can separate the funds that are created and basically have them distribute the funds to other nonprofit organizations as well, including theirs. It gives us an opportunity to put funds into nonprofit organizations' hands that actually are having a hard time getting those funds delivered through sponsorships, through event planning. We want to help them with those things as well.
Mm-hmm. How big is the chapter, the active members of the chapter here right now?
We are here in Dallas, I would say about 400 to 500 active members, which is, $100 a year, you have a membership. We also have a lot of associate members in our community as well. With that said, I have over 600 cheerleaders in the Dallas community that are active members.
Wow.
And there's another 400 to 500 players that are active members, but we have over 1,500 former NFL players living in the Dallas-Fort Worth community. And then, of course, I'm responsible for East Texas as well. There's several hundred players in that area. And then we have another area that I actually hold near to dear to my heart, which is my hometown, Shreveport, Louisiana. I actually own that territory all the way down to Alexandria. So we do have active members of a few hundred, not only LSU, but Louisiana Tech, Southern University, Grambling, those state schools, members that are active members at NFL Alumni.
That's awesome. That's really, and I don't think a lot of people necessarily understand that. And I want to make a point too, because something that I've learned that was very distressing for me, and it had to do with when I was dealing with the St. Louis or the Phoenix Cardinals now Alumni Association, and of course Kwame Lassiter, who passed, who tragically passed last year. And I had become friends, and I didn't know that statistically, in almost every major NFL city in the United States, for every member that's actively involved, you may have two or three that unfortunately are on, hit hard times,
right? Because
guys do start to play pro ball, and whether it's mismanagement, misfortune, bad luck, whatever, end up without a whole lot of contacts or context in their life.
True.
And it's, it's nice that organizations like the Alumni Association in each city, especially where they have strong chapters, can hopefully pull some of those guys in and help take care of their own type thing. And I know several players that have worked with you personally in your capacity have commented on how great it was that, you would give them the resources, point them in the direction they needed to go so that they could do what they had to do. What do you think is the biggest hurdle right now exists out there for a guy that plays long enough to be vested and then retires and takes that uniform off, and especially for guys whose identity may be tied to that uniform?
Certainly.
What do you think the biggest challenges are for those types of players right now?
Transitioning to corporate America, be it wherever you land or starting your own business. If you've had the proper practice and engaged while you were playing as a player and accepted some of the information and truly accepted it, even if it's financial advice. I'm basically looking at a young man who plays in NFL, Call Habib, that was with Cleveland Browns and now he's with Tampa, who's basically, I feel like, is an amazing young man that provides financial advice to current players.
Wow.
Which is, basically, one of those things where you're like, wow, this kid's awesome. And I watched the Hard Knocks and I went, this is unbelievable. And you catch yourself talking to the TV, telling, hey, you guys better listen to this guy because he knows what he's talking about.
That's awesome.
He can help you save your, basically put your future in check, where you can actually have reserves when you leave the NFL. And if you're having a struggle trying to find the right job, the right company to work for, or start your own business, you'll have those resources, financial resources, that we talk about all so dearly. When we leave the NFL, what do we have left? Did we plan while we were playing, or did we basically just sort of float alone and think we're going to play forever, and that we can transition and still have funds available to us as players? You take on a lot of responsibility. You take on family responsibility. You have relatives that reach out to you sometimes that are struggling. You want to try and help them. You can't help everyone, but you try your best to do the best you can to put your arms around a lot of. And then, of course, you have some community services that you're involved with. It gives you an opportunity to stay engaged in your communities regardless of where you're playing. And when you come back home, you want to feel the same warmth and fuzzy that you had when you were a player in those other communities. And sometimes that doesn't happen based on, leaving the NFL. However you left, you had an opportunity to provide and also build financial stability for yourself. Even though the funds that we played for back in the 80s and 90s, they weren't as great as they are now,
Sure.
but they were still, it was still enough where you didn't, or if you didn't plan, it didn't work out for you. But if you did, it gave you an opportunity to move forward in life. And I've seen a lot of success from guys that are in position as financial advisors, guys that are in position working for banks, guys that are in position working for companies and software, like myself. I work for a software company. Past 20 years. I was very fortunate to walk off the football field into the Miami Dolphins front office as a player program coordinator, building a resume for myself with the organization as a player.
Right.
And then, of course, using that resume for things I did in the community to put me in a position to work for the organization as an employee after football. And having that responsibility for about 3 years. And, basically after Coach Shula retired, I basically got an opportunity to move in a different direction as well.
That's awesome. I know that, there's an old, I think it's Henry Ford quote that said a lot of people miss work because it shows up in overalls they miss opportunity because it shows up in overalls and looks like work.
Exactly.
And I think too many times, you see guys that don't. You use the key word. You've got to see the challenge as an opportunity and how you can use it to your advantage and put yourself in a position to win. Coach, what I like to do is there's 100 other things we could talk about. My mind's flying, but I wanted to kind of get to this the end piece of this with the 2-minute drill. But I saw an interesting interview, and I want to and this really touched me.
Okay.
I saw an interview where you talked about Billy Ray Hobley.
Oh,
you
yeah.
had a cousin that played for the Harlem Globetrotters.
Also, had a cousin that played for the Generals, which was his nephew.
No kidding.
Yeah. So Elijah, he played for the Generals. Billy Ray played for the Globetrotters right out of Dillard University.
Cool.
Here's a guy that probably could have played. According to Magic Johnson, I had a conversation at a Super Bowl party back in '96 or so when the Cowboys and the Steelers played.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked up, introduced myself, and he went, Billy Ray Hobley. I went, first cousin. And he went, man, that guy could have played in the NBA for a long time.
No kidding.
And he chose to play for the Harlem Globetrotters. He wanted to see the world, so he got to see the world probably about 3 times.
Well, it's funny because we all have, there's always a means to an end, and we all have certain desires that me being retired military, I love doing this because we get to travel, and I get to see a lot of guys I don't see real regularly. So it's all about what you want to get out of it. Sometimes
That's for sure.
It's a credit to your first cousin. That's awesome. What I want to do is kind of roll through about 8 or 10 questions here, and we'll ad lib a little bit as we go. But I want to start out with when you look back at what you talked about initially, starting out in your football journey. Do you have a particular coach from your youth days, whether it would be even up to middle school and high school, that stands out in your mind that was influential in your journey in the football?
I tell you what, my endurance journey came from Frank Ashley, who was my first coach.
No kidding.
He was a track guy at my high school. Played a little football as well, and he was my first coach, and that's who actually started me out at center. And later on, he found out that he can not only play center, he can play every position on the field. But I stayed in that position, and that was great for me. My first time going out as a football player. He was one of those guys that drilled it, toughness, hard work pays off. And it even resonates today. Those same words, hard work pays off.
Sure.
I was getting as a 10-year-old kid back then, and then of course getting to a next level, working with middle school coaches that were former college players, like Coach Gerald at Broadmoor Junior High and Coach Mays at Broadmoor Junior High, and then moving into Byrd High School to work with Coach Jerry Burden, who was a former San Francisco 49er, was basically one of those things that he never talked about. He never talked about his accolades, being an All-American from Northwestern Louisiana as a running back and playing 2 ways in the NFL back in his day. And he was one of those guys that I stayed in touch with my entire career.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you have a favorite game or play or any during that period that stands out in your mind that was instrumental?
It was one of those things where, basically we moved into a community where the rival high school was located my senior year.
Wow.
And it wasn't. It took 3 weeks before I found out that, basically there was 2 guys that live 6 houses down. They went to the rival high school, which was Woodlawn, and they told their coach that I lived down the street from them, and I actually almost ended up going to Woodlawn my senior year and not playing any football at all.
Wow.
So I had to go live with my father, who lived in the Byrd High School district. I missed 3 days of practice that week. We were already engaged at 3 games into the season. Didn't get to practice. We played Northwood High School, which is one of the schools that Coach Byrd actually ended up at. This is the most memorable game I could probably think of because I got to play both sides of the ball.
Awesome.
For the only time that year. They had one of the top receivers in the state, Raymond Cowles, and Coach goes, hey, I know you haven't practiced but played, got a lot of work in this week, but I want to need you to go both ways. Well, no problem, Coach, I got it. And that was one of the games where, basically, I think it was more anger at the Woodlawn head coach that I scored 3 touchdowns that night offensively and picked off a pass and ran it back for 102 yards.
Wow.
So that was one of the most memorable games in high schools that I've ever had.
That's awesome. That's great. What about when you went through, and by the way, it dawned on me a minute ago, you talked about your track coach, but Ed Orgeron just recently during a recruiting trip told the coach where he was, he said, I like to recruit track guys.
Oh, he does.
Goes, and it shows when you see all the team speed they put on the field. So I thought that was interesting. When you got to LSU, is there a game situation or play that necessarily stands out in your mind as being one that is very memorable?
Well, I tell you what, it's LSU the 5 years actually I was there. It was just amazing to walk into that stadium on the Saturday nights that you got an opportunity. And I could probably, the most memorable one was going to my sophomore year, playing against Alabama on September 5th, start of the season. That year we playing Alabama, which is unusual, but get an opportunity to play in that game as a sophomore after playing in just a few games your freshman year, but get an opportunity to play in that game. But I blew out my shoulder.
Ouch.
That was memorable. Second quarter. Throwing the ball back, spinning around on the 1-yard line. Our punter hits a great one. I put it down. And unfortunately, one of my teammates didn't down the ball. He actually slid into the end zone with it. All he had to do was touch it. But, sitting out that entire year, but getting an opportunity to actually focus on everything around you, including school.
Sure.
Was played a major part because one of my teammates, who was the magna cum laude of LSU for each year he was in school, James Britt, broke his forearm. So he and I were on the walking wounded for the whole year. We both redshirted and got to play again with each other.
That's awesome.
His 5th year.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. What about away from football nowadays when you're not doing something with the Alumni Association or whatever? What do you enjoy? What activities, non-football activities do you enjoy?
Well, it's hard to get out of non-football activities, but because here's the other part. I'm involved with the Women's National Football Conference. I'm on the board of a women's professional football group. They have 16 teams around the country. Dallas has a team. Houston has a team. San Antonio, there's multiple teams in other states as well. This past year, the Dallas team played in the first Super Bowl last summer.
Cool.
They'll start their season in a few weeks, in about a week or two, and then of course it goes through June. And I think our selected location for the championship is going to be Mexico.
Oh, that'll be sweet.
Which will be pretty neat because they love football, and it's going to be in one of the. And then, of course, they have a huge women's soccer following in that Mexico area. So I'm pleased that we chose that venue. So with that said, there's a great group of women running this organization. There's a few men that are involved that are team owners. But to see the challenge and the focus, I got to coach the All-Star game, which was amazing. to do against Jen Welter, my good friend.
Sure.
Who's
No, I know of her. I've never met Jen.
She's the first woman professional football coach with the Cardinals.
Right.
And Jen and I have known each other for a long time, and that's been her hopes and dreams. Ever since I met her, she told me, I want to coach in the NFL. And I said, hey, you stick to the course and you will get an opportunity, and she has. There's other young ladies that are involved in coaching at the NFL level, which I know, and I'm very proud of them. And it's amazing to see how they've actually built themselves up to be a part of that.
That's great. What about when nobody's looking? You got a favorite snack food that you give into periodically?
Well, I spent a lot of time at this restaurant here in Irving, Las Colinas, called Walk-Ons. Seafood restaurant, straight out of Louisiana, created by a couple of my alumni brothers that attended LSU as basketball players, walk-on basketball players.
Yeah, interesting.
And they've created a huge network of great restaurants with the same product. Spent a lot of time sitting in a restaurant. I go there maybe 2 or 3 times a week. My favorite food there is the Devil on Horseback. Huge fried shrimp, wrapped in bacon and battered.
Oh my goodness!
Crispily battered. It's just amazing.
That does sound wonderful. That sounds great. What about when you look back on your playing career with the Dolphins in particular, since that was the bulk of your professional career? Do you have a person that sticks out as a best all time teammate, or one or two maybe?
There was a few guys. Glenn Blackwood is definitely one of them. Lyle Blackwood. Those guys, basically when I was coming in next year to make the team in '87, Lyle was on his way out and was giving me everything I needed. Glenn was there, and basically when you walk into an organization and guys see, hey, this guy can actually play. Mm-hmm. Let's get moving. We want to move in the right direction. We want to stay on the same path. Getting together with those guys and working with them doing that, coming back that next year was amazing.
That's awesome.
Even though we went on strike 2 weeks later, it was great.
Everybody's got their challenges to deal with, right?
That's for sure.
That's good. What in terms of kind of a closing shot? What if you for the good of the game type of focus? If you were talking to the young Liffort Hobley or a kid that you run into, maybe the high school son of a friend of yours now, what kind of things do you impart on them based on your journey and what you learned, throughout your years in football and the continuation of what you're doing? What kind of advice would you have for young people nowadays getting into football?
Well, I tell you what, there's a movie that was released about a year ago. One of my teammates, Tony Nathan, his story. If you want to see something real that's going to motivate you, watch that movie. It's an amazing story about him. And the progression of how players got very little opportunity, but he exceeded every obstacle in his way. And it's one of my best friends today. It's just,
and I will tell you, I saw the very early parts of that from a personal perspective because he was a teammate of mine at Woodlawn High School when I was in high school. So I can't remember if we've talked about that before or not. But
no, we haven't.
Yeah, Tony was a senior when I was he was a junior when I was a freshman at Woodlawn, and he was very, very unusual at that point in time. That was in 1973,
right? And
he was a 4-sport letterman.
Yeah.
And one of his 4 sports, which is a little unusual for an African-American student at that time, was golf.
Golf.
He was a tremendous golfer.
He is, still is.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, I'm going to have to link back up with him and through you. That's great.
But there's an opportunity, basically like you said, for kids that if they're looking at and what they want to see, like I said, that's a good movie to watch. And then, of course, a few other things that I think are going to be important would be where are we going with healthcare in the future for former players? Will there be an opportunity for former players to have healthcare with the new collective bargaining agreement being signed this year? We'll see where that goes.
Okay. Well, again, I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. I know you stay busy with all the activities you got and with all the additional responsibilities besides having a regular job. So we really appreciate you being on For the Good of the Game. And I just want to remind everybody out there, whenever you're out there doing anything for the game of football, remember, do it for the good of the game. We'll see you next time. Take care.